Yo, what's good, YouTube? It's your boy, the Moodster, coming right back at you again, once again. And today, people, we're going over a deck profile here on the channel. And of course, with the playmat that is in front of you guys now, we will be going over the Dark Road deck, one of the few decks I do play, but this one says more casual for me. But with that being said, we'll jump on into this deck profile. First up, I got do 2 copies of Grapha, Dragon Lord of Dark World. His effect is you can special summon this card from your graveyard by returning 1 Dark World monster you control to your hand, except Grapha, Dragon Lord of the Dark World. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, target 1 card your opponent controls, destroy that target. Then if this card was discarded from your hand to the graveyard by an opponent's card effect, look at 1 random card in your opponent's hand. Then if it was a monster, you can special summon it to your field. So that helps out tremendously. Next up, we got 2 copies of Belial, Marquis of Darkness. His effect is your opponent cannot target any face-up monsters you control, except Belial, Marquis of Darkness, for an attack, or with spell and trap card effects. Next is 2 copies of Rain, Bex, Overlord of Dark World. If this card is discarded from your hand to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, special summon this card from the graveyard. If summoned this way, destroy all monsters your opponent controls, or all spell and trap cards they control. Next up, we got 2 copies of Gold, Warlord of Dark World. His effect is, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, if it was discarded from your hand to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, you can target up to 2 cards your opponent controls, special summon this card from the graveyard, then destroy those targets, if any. Next up is 2 copies of Silva, Warlord of Dark World. His effect is, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, special summon this card. Then if it was discarded from your hand to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, your opponent places exactly 2 cards from their hand on the bottom of their deck in any order. Next up is 2 copies of Braun, Mad King of Dark World. His effect is, when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can discard 1 card. Next up is just 1 copy of Snow, Unlighted of Dark World. And his effect is that if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, by an opponent's card effect, you can target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, add 1 Dark World card from your deck to your hand, then special summon that target, if any, in defense position. Next up is 2 copies of Baze, Vanguard of Dark World. His effect is, if this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, special summon this card. Next up is 2 copies of Bro, Huntsman of Dark World. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effect, draw one card. Or if it was discarded from your hand to your graveyard by an opponent's card effect, draw two cards instead. Next up is one copy of Nurse Reflect You, the following one. Her effect is any effect that will make your opponent gain life points inflicts the same amount of damage to them instead. Next up is two copies of Nudoria. His effect is if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, target one monster on the field, destroy that target. Next up is one copy of Sangan. His effect, if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, add one monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck to your hand, but you can activate cards or the effect of cards with that name for the rest of the turn. You can only use the effect of Sangan once per turn. Next up is Scar, Scout of Dark World. His effect, if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, add one level 4 or lower Dark World monster from your deck to your hand. Next up is a copy of Kaki, Gorilla of Dark World. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by a card effect, target one monster on the field and destroy it. Next up is Green, Tactician of Dark World. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effect, target one spell or trap card on the field and destroy it. Next up is Cerealial, Guru of the Dark World. If this card is discarded to the graveyard by card effect, special summon this card to your opponent's field in defense position. If this card is special summoned by the effect of a Dark World card, your opponent discards one card. Next up is Goblin King. While you control another Fang monster, monsters cannot attack this card. This card's attack and defense becomes the number of other Fang monsters on the field times 1,000. The next one is Grave Squirmer. His effect, if this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, target one card on the field, destroy that target. Next up is Battle Fader. When an opponent's monster declares a direct attack, you can special summon this card from your hand, then end the battle phase. If summoned this way, banish it when it leaves the field. Next is Mad Reloader. If this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, send two cards from your hand to the graveyard, and if you do, draw two cards. And next up is Tragodia. His effect is when you take battle damage, you can special summon this card from your hand. It gains 600 attack and defense for each card in your hand. Once per turn, you can send one monster from your hand to the graveyard, then target one face-up monster your opponent controls with the same level the same monster had in the hand. Take control of that face-up monster. Once per turn, you can target one monster in your graveyard. This card's level becomes the same as that target's until the end of the turn. And for our vanilla monsters, we got Sir, Knight of the Dark World, and two copies of Rain, Gatekeeper of the Dark World. And that's the three vanilla monsters we got in the deck. For our spell cards, we got Dark Eruption. Target one dark monster with 1500 or less attack in your graveyard. Add that target to your hand. Next is Aether of Darkness. Draw 2 cards, then banish 1 dark monster from your hand. Or, if you do not have any in your hand, send your entire hand to the graveyard. Next up is Beginning of the End. If you have 7 or more dark monsters in your graveyard, banish 5 dark monsters from your graveyard and draw 3 cards. Next one is Gateway to the Dark World. Target 1 Dark World monster in your graveyard. Special summon that target. You cannot summon monsters the turn you activate this card, except by this card effect, but you can normal set. Next one is Terraforming. You can add 1 field spell from your deck to your hand. Next up is the Gates of the Dark World. All Fiend monsters gains 300 attack and defense. Once per turn, you can banish 1 Fiend monster from your graveyard, discard 1 Fiend monster, then draw 1 card. Next up is the Veil of Darkness. During your draw phase, if you draw a dark monster, you can reveal any number of them, send them to the graveyard, then you can draw 1 more card. Next one is Dark World Lightning. Target 1 set card on the field, destroy that target, then discard 1 card. Next one is Dark World Dealings. Each player draws 1 card, then each player discards 1 card. Then next is Raigeki. Destroy all monsters your opponent controls. And our last spell card is the Cellar Grave. Each player targets 1 monster in their own graveyard, then special summons that target from their graveyard in face down defense position. Our first trap card is Robbing Zombie. If your monster inflicts battle damage to your opponent, send the top card of their deck to the graveyard. Next is Escape from the Dark Dimension. Target 1 of your banished dark monsters, special summon that target. When this card leaves the field, destroy that target, and if you do, banish it. When that target is destroyed, destroy this card. Next one is Eradicator Epidemic Virus. Target 1 of your banished tribute 1 dark monster with 2,500 or more attack, and declare 1 type of card, either a spell or trap. Look at your opponent's hand, all spells and traps they control, and all cards they draw until the end of their third turn. After this card's activation, and destroy all cards with that declared type. Next up is Deck Devastation Virus. Tribute 1 dark monster with 2,000 or more attack. Look at your opponent's hand, all monsters they control, and all cards they draw until the end of their third turn after this card's activation, and destroy all those monsters with 15,000 or less attack. Next up, we got Dark Scheme. Your opponent discards 1 card to negate this card's effect. Otherwise, both players discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. Next up is Dark Deal. When your opponent activates a normal spell card, pay 1,000 life points. The activate effect of that normal spell becomes your opponent discards 1 random card. Next up is Call of the Hunted. Activate this card by targeting 1 monster in your graveyard. Special summon that target in attack position. When this card leaves the field, destroy that monster. When that monster is destroyed, destroy this card. Next is the Forces of Darkness. Target 2 Dark World monsters in your graveyard. Add those targets to your hand. And our last trap card is the Transmigration Prophecy. Target 2 cards in the graveyard. Shuffle those targets into the respective decks. And that is the end of our Dark World deck profile. There will be more deck profiles to come, so keep an eye out and make sure you guys subscribe so you guys won't miss out on any future episodes. But with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video, because we're outie 5 bajillion. Bye!